Commander Vex Thaler stared at his screen with wide eyes. His purple skin had turned pale, and his hands shook as he gripped the edge of his control panel. In 50 years of service to the Zephyrian Empire, he had never seen anything like this. Ship on his scanner was massive. It stretched nearly 2 miles from front to back, with a sleek black hull that seemed to drink in the light from nearby stars. Strange symbols glowed along its sides in patterns that hurt to look at. The vessel moved through space with impossible grace for something so large. "Sir," his communications officer called out, her voice tight with fear. "We're getting a transmission." Vex's throat felt dry. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, and a human face appeared. The woman looked to be in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a tight knot and eyes like frozen steel. Scars ran down the left side of her face, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades in the void. "This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Human Colonial Fleet. We've come home." The bridge fell silent. Several of Vex's crew members stepped backward from their stations. The younger ones looked confused, but the older officers knew exactly who. They were looking at humans were supposed to be gone, extinct. The Federation had made sure of that 50 years ago. Vex found his voice. "Unknown vessel, you are in violation of Federation space. Humans were banished by decree of the Galactic Council. You must leave immediately." Admiral Sullivan's expression didn't change. "Decree? We never agreed to any decree. We were driven. Out. There's a difference." "The law is clear," Vex said, trying to sound stronger than he felt. "Your species chose exile over compliance with Federation standards." For the first time, Sullivan smiled. It was not a pleasant sight. "Standards? Is that what you called it? We remember it differently. We remember being told our children were too dangerous to live. We remember being given a choice between genetic slavery and death in the dark." On the bridge of the human warship, Dr. Alex Rivera stood beside his admiral. He was younger than Sullivan, maybe 45, with dark hair and the pale skin of someone who had spent decades in artificial light. His fingers danced across a control panel, reading the Federation ship systems like an open book. "Their weapons are primitive," he said quietly. "Plasma cannons and kinetic missiles. Their shields wouldn't stop a child's toy." Sullivan nodded, but kept her eyes on the screen. "Commander Thaler, isn't it? I remember your father. He was there when they cast us out. He said humans were a mistake. That needed correcting." Vex's eyes widened. His father had died 20 years ago, but he had indeed been part of the exile fleet. How could she possibly know that? "My father served the Federation with honor," Vex said. "Your father helped murder 1 billion innocent people," Sullivan replied. "But we're not here to discuss the past. We're here to reclaim what was stolen from us." Behind Sullivan, other figures moved in the shadows of the human bridge. "Commander." Ben Clark stepped forward, and Vex felt his blood turn to ice. The man was tall and broad, but there was something wrong about him. His movements were too smooth, too perfect. His eyes reflected light like a cat's. "Admiral," Clark said, his voice carrying strange harmonics. "The rest of the fleet is in position?" "Fleet?" Vex whispered. Sullivan's smile grew wider. "Did you think we came alone? Did you think 50 years in the void would make us weak?" Vex's sensor officer suddenly cried out. "Sir, multiple contacts. They're everywhere." The tactical display lit up with red dots. Dozens of ships appeared as if from nowhere, surrounding the lone Federation patrol vessel. Each one was different, but all carried the same alien beauty as the flagship. Some were sleek like knives, others bristled with weapons that defied identification. "Impossible," Vex breathed. "Our sensors would have detected you." "Your sensors see what we allow them to see," Dr. Rivera said from the human ship. "We've had 50 years to learn new tricks. Captain Lisa Morgan's voice crackled over the comm from her fighter squadron. Admiral, we have lock on their weapons and engines. One word, and they're floating dead in space. Sullivan held up a hand. Not yet. Lisa, Commander Thaler and his crew are going to deliver a message for us. Vex felt sweat running down his back despite the cool air on his bridge. What message? Tell your Federation masters that humanity has returned. Tell them we're not the same species that left this galaxy. Tell them we've evolved. Sullivan leaned forward in her chair. And tell them they have 72 hours to evacuate the Sol system and return everything they stole from us. And if they refuse? Sullivan's eyes grew cold as the space between stars. Then they'll learn why exile was the wrong choice. They should have killed us all when they had the chance. The transmission cut off, leaving Vex staring at a blank screen. Around him, his crew looked to him for orders, but he had none to give. How do you fight monsters that used to be human? How do you report that the Federation's greatest mistake had returned to haunt them? Sir, his communications officer asked. Should we send the message? Vex nodded slowly. In the distance, the human fleet began to move toward the inner systems, their ships flowing through space like hunting sharks. 50 years ago, the Federation had cast out a wounded species. Now something else entirely had come home. The exile was over. The reckoning was about to begin. Admiral Kate Sullivan walked through the corridors of her ship, her boots echoing off metal walls that hummed with power. The USS Retribution was not like the ships humans had built before the exile. Every surface pulsed with energy, and the air itself seemed alive with possibilities. She stopped at a viewing port and stared out at the stars. 50 years ago, she had been a young captain watching Earth burn. The Federation had given humanity an ultimatum: change who they were at the genetic level, or leave forever. Most humans had chosen to fight. They had lost. You're thinking about the old days again, Dr. Alex Rivera said as he joined her at the window. Kate didn't turn around. Hard not to. We were so naive back then. We thought we could reason with them. We thought they would see us as equals. They saw us as threats, Rivera replied, and they were right. The memory came back to Kate like a knife to the chest. She had been commanding the USS Liberty when the Federation fleet surrounded Earth. Admiral Zara Kinth herself had delivered the final warning over the global communications network. Humanity will submit to genetic modification to remove aggressive tendencies, or humanity will leave known space forever. You have 24 hours to decide. The debates had raged across every human world. Some wanted to accept the changes, to become something tame and acceptable to the Federation. Others wanted to fight, even though they knew they would lose. In the end, the choice had been made by the children. We won't let you change us, a young girl had said during the global vote. If we can't be human, then we'll find somewhere else. To be human, the exodus had begun immediately. Every ship that could fly was loaded with people, technology, and hope. The Federation had watched them go, believing they were sending humanity to die in the empty spaces between galaxies. Tell me about the early years again, Commander Ben Clark said as he approached. He had been born in the void, 20 years into their journey. To him, the stories of Earth were like fairy tales. Kate smiled at the young man. Ben was tall and strong, but there was something different about him. All the Void-born were different. They had adapted to life in space in ways that still amazed the older generation. The first 10 years were the hardest, Kate said. We had limited supplies and no way to get more. People were dying from radiation, from starvation, from despair. We almost didn't make it. Rivera picked up the story. That's when we started the first experiments. We had to change or die, so we chose to change. But unlike the Federation's plan, We chose how to change ourselves. The breakthrough had come from an unlikely source. Dr. Sarah Kim, a young geneticist who had been working on life extension before the exile, had proposed something radical. Instead of just treating the symptoms of their problems, why not solve them at the source? The Consciousness Transfer Project was her idea, Rivera continued. If we could store human minds in quantum matrices, death would become temporary. We could take risks that would have killed us before. Clark nodded. He had died twice during his life, once in a ship explosion and once during a dangerous experiment. Both times, his mind had been restored to a new body within hours. To the Void-born, death was just another problem to solve. But the real breakthrough was the ship AI integration, Kate said. When we learned to link human consciousness with ship systems, everything changed. She remembered the first time she had linked with the Retribution systems. Her mind had expanded to encompass the entire vessel. She could feel every bolt, every wire, every drop of fuel. The ship had become part of her body, and she had become part of it. Show him the replication chambers, Rivera said. They walked deeper into the ship, past crew quarters where humans worked alongside beings that looked human but were not quite the same. Some had modified themselves for life in zero gravity, with elongated limbs and enhanced reflexes. Others had integrated so completely with technology that the line between flesh and machine had disappeared. The replication chamber was a massive room filled with flowing metal that seemed alive. As they watched, the metal began to take shape, forming components for weapons, tools, and even new ships. We learned to make anything we needed, Rivera explained to Clark. Raw materials were scarce, so we had to get creative. This system can turn asteroid dust into starship hulls or space debris into quantum computers. Clark ran his hand along one of the flowing metal streams. And this is how we built the fleet. Part of it, Kate said. The rest came from salvage. Operations. Every Federation ship that ever crashed, every piece of alien technology we could find, we studied it and improved on it. They had become scavengers at first, picking through the debris fields left by ancient wars. But each discovery had taught them something new. The Zephyrians' energy shields, the Crystalline Empire's matter manipulation, the Void Wraith's phase shifting. Technology. Humanity had learned from them all and made them better. The Federation thought they were protecting the galaxy from us, Kate said. They were actually protecting us from them. 50 years of fighting for survival made us stronger than we ever could have been in comfort. Captain Lisa Morgan joined. Them in the chamber, still wearing her flight suit from a patrol mission. Her squadron had been testing the new phase shift fighters, and she looked excited. Admiral, you need to see this, she said, activating a holographic display. We just finished the deep scan of Federation space. Their fleet positions, their defense networks, their communication hubs. We have it all. The display showed the galaxy as the Federation knew it, with trade routes and military bases marked in neat, orderly patterns. But overlaid on top of it was another map, showing gaps and weaknesses that the Federation didn't even know existed. They've grown soft, Morgan said. 50 years without a real threat has made them lazy. Their patrols are predictable, their defenses are outdated, and their response times are terrible. Kate studied the display with satisfaction. The Federation had spent 50 years believing they were safe. They had built their civilization on the bones of humanity's exile, never imagining that their victims might return. How long until we reach Sol? She asked. 6 hours at current speed, Rivera replied. The advanced scouts report that Federation forces are already mobilizing, but they're moving to defend the wrong positions. Kate nodded. The Federation was preparing for the war they remembered, not the war humanity was bringing to them. They expected human ships to be vulnerable to their weapons, human tactics to be predictable, human technology to be inferior. They were wrong on all counts. Begin the final preparations, Kate ordered. In 6 hours, we take back our birthright. The Federation cast us out to die. Instead, we learned to live. Now we're going to teach them the difference. As they prepared for battle, the Void-born crew moved with perfect efficiency. They had been shaped by exile into something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. The Federation had created their own nemesis, and now it was coming home. The emergency session of the Federation Council was chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted at each other across the great chamber, their voices mixing into a wall of panic and rage. At the center of it all, Admiral Zara Kinth stood, silent, her blue skin pale with shock. "This is impossible," roared Ambassador Grex, his rocky hide scraping against his chair. "Humans are extinct. We made sure of that." "Apparently, we didn't," Kinth said quietly. Her words cut through the noise like a blade. "I've seen the sensor readings. I've heard the communications. They're back, and they're not the same species we banished." Chancellor Voss, the leader of the Zephyrian Empire, leaned forward in his floating chair. "How many ships?" "Unknown," Kinth replied. "Our patrol vessels detected at least 50, but their technology makes accurate counts impossible. They appear and disappear at will." The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed the human fleet's approach vector. The ships moved in perfect formation toward the Sol system, ignoring all attempts at communication except for one repeating message. 72 hours, Kinth read from the datapad. "That's all they're giving us. Evacuate Sol and return all human artifacts, or face the consequences." Preposterous. Ambassador Grex slammed his massive fist on his desk. "We are the Federation. We control this galaxy. A handful of human refugees cannot dictate terms to us." Chancellor Voss was not so confident. He had been young during the human exile, but he remembered the stories. Humans had been the most aggressive, most adaptable species the galaxy had ever seen. That's why they had been banished in the first place. "Admiral Kinth," he said, "in your professional opinion, what are we dealing with?" Kinth activated her personal display, showing detailed scans of the human flagship. "This is the USS Retribution. 2 miles long, unknown hull composition, energy signatures that don't match any known technology. It passed through our patrol ship's shields like they weren't there." "Passed through?" asked Dr. Yan, the Federation's chief scientist. "That's impossible. Matter cannot simply ignore energy barriers." "Tell that to the humans," Kinth said grimly. "They've learned tricks we don't understand. My recommendation is immediate negotiation." "Negotiation?" Grex stood up, his massive form towering over the others. "With exiles? With outcasts? Never." But Chancellor Voss was already thinking ahead. "How large a fleet can we assemble?" "Our main battle fleet numbers 200 ships," Kinth replied, "plus support vessels and planetary defense platforms. We have overwhelming numerical superiority." "Then we fight," Voss decided. "Prepare the fleet. If humanity wants war, we'll give them one they'll never forget." 3 systems away, Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the Federation's response unfold on her screens. Dr. Rivera worked beside her, his fingers dancing over controls that seemed to respond to his thoughts rather than his touch. "They're mobilizing everything," Rivera reported. 237 ships, including their newest dreadnoughts. "They're planning to meet us at Sol." Commander Ben Clark smiled, and his teeth gleamed like metal in the bridge lighting. "Good. It's been too long since we had a proper test." Sullivan nodded. "How are the preparations going?" "The quantum mines are in position," Rivera said. "We've been seeding the space around Sol for weeks with cloaked probes. The moment their fleet enters the system, They'll be in our kill zone. Captain Lisa Morgan's voice crackled over the cum from the fighter bay. Admiral, my squadrons are ready. The new phase shift fighters have exceeded all expectations. We can be inside their ships before they know we're there. Sullivan allowed herself a small smile. The Federation was preparing to fight the war they remembered, against the humans they thought they knew. But the humans who had left 50 years ago were gone. What had returned was something new, something evolved, something dangerous. Open a channel to the Federation fleet, Sullivan ordered. The main screen flickered, and Admiral Kinth's face peered. She looked older than Sullivan remembered, with new lines around her eyes and gray in her hair. The years had not been kind to the woman who had helped orchestrate humanity's exile. Admiral Sullivan, Kinth said stiffly. I see you survived after all. Hello, Zara, Sullivan replied. You look tired. Command wearing you down? What do you want? Kinth demanded. I told you what I want. Sol system evacuated and clean. All human artifacts returned. All human remains given proper burial. Sullivan's voice hardened. Reparations for 50 years of stolen worlds and murdered children. Impossible. The Federation Council will never agree to such terms. Sullivan shrugged. Then you've chosen. War. I hope you're ready for what comes next. We have over 200 ships, Kinth said. You have, what, 50? Your numerical disadvantage is insurmountable. Numbers, Clark said, stepping into view of the camera. You always did think numbers mattered. Kinth stared at the young commander, and Sullivan saw recognition dawn in her eyes. You're void-born, one of the exiled children. I am humanity's future, Clark replied. We are what you created when you cast us out. We are what survival looks like. The transmission ended, and Sullivan turned to her crew. Around the bridge, humans and post-humans worked in perfect harmony. Some had modified themselves for life in space. Others had integrated with AI systems, and a few had undergone changes so radical that they barely looked human at all. Begin Phase 1, Sullivan ordered. Throughout the human fleet, ships began to change. Their hulls flowed like liquid, reconfiguring themselves for battle. Weapons that had been hidden inside the ship's structure emerged and began to charge with. Energies that made space itself ripple. Dr. Rivera's console lit up with status reports. All ships report ready. Quantum mines are armed and waiting. Fighter squadrons are deployed and cloaked. The Federation fleet is entering the system, reported the sensor officer. On the tactical display, red dots began to appear at the edge of Sol system. The Federation fleet came out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their ships gleaming in the light of Earth's sun. They moved with confidence, believing their numbers would carry the day. Admiral Kinth stood on the bridge of her flagship, FSS Dominion, watching the human fleet take position near Earth. They looked so small compared to her massive armada. Surely this would be over quickly. All ships, battle formation, she ordered. Target the lead vessel. We'll make this quick and clean. But as her fleet advanced, something felt wrong. The humans weren't moving to meet them. They just waited, floating near their ancestral home like hunters in a trap. Admiral, her sensor officer called out. I'm detecting strange energy readings throughout the system. It's like the space itself is ... wrong. Kinth felt a chill run down her spine. Explain. The quantum background radiation is fluctuating in patterns I've never seen. It's almost like there are invisible objects scattered throughout the system. Too late, Kinth realized what they were flying into. All stop. Reverse engines. But the trap was already sprung. Dr. Rivera smiled as he pressed a single button, and space itself began to tear apart around the Federation fleet that the war for humanity's return had begun. The first quantum mine exploded in a burst of twisted spacetime that swallowed 3 Federation ships whole. Admiral Zara Kinth watched in horror as the vessels simply vanished, not destroyed, but erased from existence itself. Evasive maneuvers. She screamed, but it was too late. The mines had been placed with perfect precision, turning the Federation's tight formation into a death trap. Another explosion tore through the center of her fleet, and 5 more ships disappeared into the void. Admiral, her communications officer shouted over the chaos. We're detecting massive energy spikes from the human ships. On her tactical display, Kinth watched the impossible happen. The USS Retribution began to split apart, its hull flowing like liquid mercury. But instead of breaking into pieces, it was creating copies of itself. Within seconds, there were 5 identical ships where one had been before. Impossible, she whispered. Dr. Alex Rivera stood calmly on the bridge of the original Retribution, his hands moving over controls that seemed to anticipate his thoughts. Replication complete, he reported to Admiral Sullivan. All 5 ships are fully functional and ready for combat. Just like we practiced, Sullivan said with satisfaction. Begin Phase 2. The replicated ships moved apart, each one taking position around the trapped Federation fleet. Their weapons began to charge, but these were not the plasma cannons and missile systems the Federation remembered. These were something new, something that made the fabric of space itself crawl with power. Commander Ben Clark spoke into his communicator. All boarding teams, prepare for phase insertion. Remember, we want their command staff alive for questioning. Throughout the human fleet, soldiers prepared for battle. But these were not ordinary soldiers. The void-born warriors had been shaped by 50 years of evolution and desperation. They moved with inhuman grace, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to react faster than any baseline human could. Captain Lisa Morgan sat in the cockpit of her fighter, watching her squadron prepare for launch. The new phase shift fighters were beautiful in their deadly efficiency. They could slip through solid matter like ghosts, appearing inside enemy ships without warning. All pilots, this is Angel Leader, she said over the comm. Target their command ships first. We want to cut off their head before they can organize a response. The Federation fleet tried to reform their battle lines, but the quantum mines made any coordinated movement impossible. Ships exploded or vanished every few seconds as they triggered more of the invisible traps. Return fire, Kent ordered. All weapons, target the lead human ship. The Federation fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma beams and kinetic. Missiles filled the space between the two forces. But when the weapons reached the human ships, something impossible happened. The attacks simply passed through them, as if they weren't there. Phase shifting, Rivera explained to a junior officer. We learned it from the void wraiths. Our ships exist in a slightly different dimensional space. Their weapons can't touch us unless we allow it. Sullivan nodded approvingly. Now show them what our weapons can do. The human ships fired back, but their weapons were unlike anything the Federation had ever seen. Beams of pure force that ignored shields and armor, tearing through the enemy ships like paper. Where they struck, matter simply ceased to exist, leaving perfect holes in the hulls of the Federation vessels. Shields down to 30%. Kintz, tactical officer, reported. Hull breaches on decks 5 through 12. But the real shock came when the human fighters launched. Lisa Morgan's squadron phased through the hull of the FSS Dominion without triggering any alarms. They materialized in the ship's corridors, their weapons already firing. The Federation crew never had a chance. The human fighters moved like shadows, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge return fire while cutting down anyone who stood in their way. But they weren't just killing randomly. They had specific targets. Bridge secured, Morgan reported as her team surrounded the command center. Admiral Kinth is in custody. Similar reports came in from across the fleet. Human boarding parties appeared inside ship after ship, materializing from nowhere to capture or kill the command crews. The Federation's advantage in numbers meant nothing when their enemies could ignore physical barriers. Clark led one of the boarding teams personally, phasing through the armor of a Federation dreadnought. The ship's security forces tried to stop him, but their weapons passed harmlessly through his shifted form. When he solidified, his return fire was deadly accurate. Engineering secured, he reported, beginning data extraction. The human teams moved with surgical precision, capturing key personnel and stealing every piece of information they could find. 50 years of exile had taught them the value of intelligence, and they were determined to learn everything about their enemy's capabilities. Back on the Retribution, Sullivan watched the battle unfold with cold satisfaction. The Federation fleet was being systematically destroyed, their ships picked apart by weapons they couldn't defend against and enemies they couldn't hit. "Admiral," Rivera said, "we're receiving a transmission from the FSS Dominion. Put it through." "Admiral." Kinth appeared on the screen, but she was no longer on her own bridge. She sat in a human detention cell, her uniform torn and her face pale with shock. "Admiral Sullivan," she said, her voice shaking. "I surrender. My fleet surrenders. Please, call off your attack. Surrender?" Sullivan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think this is about surrender? You think you can just give up and go home?" "What do you want?" Kinth pleaded. "I want you to understand what you did to us," Sullivan replied. 50 years ago, you cast out an entire species. You condemned billions of people to death in the void. You destroyed our worlds, scattered our children, and called it justice. We thought we were protecting the galaxy, Kinth said weakly. "You were protecting yourselves," Clark said, appearing beside Sullivan. "You were afraid of what humanity might become. You were right to be afraid." The human fleet continued its deadly work, methodically destroying every Federation ship that hadn't already surrendered. But they weren't just winning a battle. They were making a statement. The weak, primitive humans who had been driven from the galaxy were gone. What had returned was something far more dangerous. "Status report," Sullivan ordered. Rivera consulted. His displays. 90% of the Federation fleet has been destroyed or captured. The remainder are attempting to flee, but our pursuit ships are faster. Casualties on our side? None. We've taken some minor damage to outer hulls, but no loss of life. Sullivan nodded grimly. The Federation had thought they were sending a message with their massive fleet. Instead, they had given humanity a chance to demonstrate just how far they had evolved. 200 ships destroyed by 50, with no human losses. "Open a channel to all Federation worlds," Sullivan ordered. The transmission went out across the galaxy, carrying her image to every major population center. When she spoke, her words were heard by trillions of beings. "People of the Federation," she began, "today you have seen the return of humanity. Your leaders told you we were gone, that we had been dealt with. They lied. We survived. We evolved. We became something new." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Your fleet came to Sol, to destroy us. Instead, we have destroyed them. This is not the end of our conflict. This is the beginning. We are taking back what was stolen from us. We are reclaiming our place in the galaxy. And to those who participated in our exile," Sullivan continued, her voice growing cold, "we have not forgotten. We have not forgiven. Justice is coming." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. Humanity had returned, and they were no longer the species that had been driven away. They were evolution itself, and they had come home to collect their due. 3 days after the destruction of the Federation fleet, Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the ruins of the old United Nations building on Earth. The structure had been left to decay during the 50 years of human exile, but she could still see traces of the civilization that had once called this world home. "The Federation Council has requested a meeting," Dr. Alex Rivera said, joining her among the rubble. "They want to discuss terms." Sullivan smiled coldly. "Terms? After 50 years, they want to discuss terms? Chancellor Voss himself is coming." Rivera continued, "Along with representatives from every major species. They're scared, Kate, really scared." "Good," Sullivan replied. "Fear is the only language they understand." Commander Ben Clark approached from the landing area, where human ships were unloading supplies and personnel. The work of reclaiming Earth had begun immediately after the battle, with teams of specialists working to restore the planet's ecosystems and infrastructure. "The prisoner transfers are complete," Clark reported. "Admiral Kinth and her senior staff are secured in the detention facility. They're ready for questioning whenever you want to begin." Sullivan nodded. The captured Federation officers would provide valuable intelligence about their former enemies' capabilities and intentions. But more importantly, they would serve as examples of what happened to those who opposed humanity's return. Captain Lisa Morgan's voice crackled over the communicator. "Admiral, we have incoming ships at the edge of the system." "It's the Federation." "Delegation. Let them come," Sullivan said. "But make sure they understand the new rules. Any aggressive action, any attempt at deception, and they join Kinth in detention." The Federation delegation arrived in a small diplomatic vessel, escorted by human fighters that could have destroyed them without effort. Chancellor Voss stepped off the ship with visible reluctance, his blue skin pale with fear. The other representatives looked equally uncomfortable. They were brought to what had once been the General Assembly Hall of the United Nations. Sullivan had chosen the location deliberately. This was where humanity had once tried to solve problems through discussion and compromise. Now it would be where their conquerors learned the price of exile. "Chancellor Voss," Sullivan said as she entered the hall. "How kind of you to visit. It's been, 50 years since you were last on Earth." Voss tried to maintain his dignity, but his hands shook as he spoke. "Admiral Sullivan, we come seeking peace. The Federation wishes to open negotiations regarding your return to the galaxy." "Return?" Sullivan laughed. "We never left the galaxy, Chancellor. We were driven to its edges, forced to survive in the void between stars. But we never left." Dr. Rivera activated a holographic display showing the human fleet's true size. The Federation delegates gasped as hundreds of ships appeared on the screen, each one more advanced than anything in their own navy. "This is what 50 years of exile created," Rivera explained. "Every ship you see was built with technology you forced us to develop. Every weapon system was designed to overcome defenses you taught us to expect." Ambassador Grex, the rocky-skinned representative who had been so aggressive during the emergency council session, now looked small and frightened. "How many ships do you have?" "Enough," Sullivan replied simply. "More than enough." Commander Clark stepped forward, and the Federation delegates instinctively moved back. His presence radiated a controlled danger that made their primitive instincts scream warnings. "Tell them about the others," Clark said to Sullivan. Sullivan smiled. "The others? Yes, the Federation should know about them. You see, not every human who died during the exile stayed dead." She gestured to Rivera, who activated another display. This one showed massive construction facilities hidden in the dark spaces between galaxies, where human technology had achieved the impossible: consciousness transfer, Rivera explained. "Every human who died during our exile had their mind recorded and stored. We've been bringing them back, one by one, in new bodies designed for our new reality." "Impossible," whispered Dr. Yan, the Federation's chief scientist. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical. We had 50 years to solve the energy problem, Clark said. 50 years to solve every problem you created when you cast us out. Sullivan walked closer to the Federation delegates, and they unconsciously backed away from her. Do you understand what you did? You didn't just banish 1 billion humans. You created the conditions for us to evolve beyond your ability to control or comprehend. Chancellor Voss found his voice. What do you want from us? Justice, Sullivan replied. The worlds you stole will be returned. The resources you plundered will be repaid. The species that participated in our exile will face the same choice you gave us 50 years ago. What choice? Voss asked, though he already knew the answer. Genetic modification to remove your capacity for oppression, Clark said with a predatory smile. Or